Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all our witnesses, especially our two distinguished colleagues from the Senate. We appreciate your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I've been engaged on this issue for quite some time now and been particularly interested in the role the federal government takes in permitting LNG export facilities. And unlike some of my colleagues on this committee, I've actually been pleased with the careful consideration DOE has given to the issue. You know, it wasn't that many years ago when companies were building LNG import facilities, making bets on the need for imported LNG to meet our energy demand. Who would have guessed in less than a decade these same companies would now be petitioning DOE to turn those import facilities into export facilities? So I don't fault DOE for taking a cautious and careful approach to approving these permits. By submitting a two-part study on the effects of LNG export on the U.S. economy and reviewing the hundreds of public comments submitted to those studies, DOE has taken the proper action to understand the issue. But that study showed us that in every scenario modeled, LNG exports offer a net gain to the U.S. economy. This really shouldn't surprise any of us. The fact that economies gain from allowing trade is not new. But as a guy from Pittsburgh who has witnessed the effects of trade on the local economy, I think what we should be concerned with is who gains, how much do they gain, and at what cost to the environment. And while I remain convinced that LNG exporting should be both allowed and supported by the federal government, I don't believe a careless blanket approval of all pending permits would serve the purpose of the American people. Let me ask my two distinguished colleagues, you both indicate your support for LNG exporting, whether by allowing the free market to act or by opposition to any kind of export ban, and I agree with that. Do you believe, though, that the Department of Energy does have a role to play, a proper role to play in the permitting of LNG export permits as determining it's in the public interest? Right. Yes, Senator Dorgan, you'd agree with
and I think, I think ultimately there will be far fewer facilities built than the numbers that are being tossed around these days. And let me, before I leave here today, Mr. Chairman, have the record show my great restraint as an author of the Renewable Fuel Standard in 2005, my great restraint sitting next to my friend Senator Johnson without responding to a bit of it.
We don't grow corn in Louisiana, Mr. Chairman.
And to both my colleagues, you believe DOE currently has the sufficient information to act on these remaining permits? Yeah. Thank you. I want to also ask Mr. Bradbury. First, I want to say welcome back to the committee, Mr. Bradbury. It's a pleasure to see you here. And as some of my colleagues on the committee may recall, Mr. Bradbury was instrumental in developing a mechanism in the Waxman-Markey bill, which later became called the Doyle-Inslee provision, which offered protection for energy-intensive and trade-exposed industries. It seems like you're back here today with some equally impressive work. While I note my support for LNG exporting, I take seriously the concerns you've raised about methane leakage and life cycle emissions. As you know, EPA just lowered its estimates of methane leaks during natural gas production by almost 20% from what they had previously reported. Nonetheless, if concerns about methane leakage remain, it's important, I think, that we address them if we're going to support export of this resource to other countries. So to that end, Mr. Bradbury, could you please help us understand how the technologies you cite in your testimony work? Can they really significantly reduce fugitive methane emissions while being cost-effective and have payback periods of 3 years and less? Could you give us some detail on that? And then secondly, if these technologies help companies retain their product by not letting it escape into the air, why aren't gas companies making the investment in them?
Well, thank you for the question. I'll do my best to respond as quickly as possible. And to the first question also, I think is a partial response to Mr. Shimkus' question earlier, which is that our projections of payback period for these technologies are actually not theoretical. They're based on published estimates from actual experience with these technologies, which you can find on Natural Gas Star website and other sources as well. So, as I noted earlier in response to Mr. Waxman's question, it really is, this is analogous to energy efficiency. You're not wasting product, and so there's a benefit economically over time. There are more details on these technologies to some extent are in my testimony, but also in a full report, which I'd be happy to share with you and discuss afterwards. Couple technologies, as I mentioned initially. So green completions, I also mentioned earlier, which is very cost-effective and now required for gas wells. There's the use of plunger lift systems for liquids unloading. It's essentially to remove liquids from a well so that gas can flow more freely. These systems avoid venting that's unnecessary when you're cleaning these wells up. That could be used more widely. And just simple leak detection and repair. So sending people out to these sites to identify the leaks and then repair them. Of course, it puts people to work doing that, and you can get a good payback as well. And the final point I really would like to emphasize, the reason that companies aren't doing this in some cases, there are a couple different answers. It's similar to why companies don't always have the most efficient systems in terms of energy efficiency, is there competing priorities for investment. And there's also market structure issues. The production company that owns the gas is often not the same as the service company or midstream company that processes the gas, or the pipeline companies through which the gas flows. And FERC has authority over that to set tariffs and rates that sometimes are structured so that this is just a pass-through cost. So while it would be beneficial to the environment and to consumers to reduce these leaks, it's not necessarily aligned properly through the market structure in terms of business interests. Thanks for the question, and great to see you again, and great to be back. Thanks for your remarks.